He stuck his finger in the end of your what?
Howdy, everyone. Pull up a chair, kick up your boots, and have a listen as you sip on a sody pop. It's Support Your Local Podcast, the show that breaks down the 1969 Western comedy classic, Support Your Local Sheriff, scene by scene. I'm your host, Robert Smith, coming to you near beautiful Tombstone. Yes, that one. Today we're going to take a look at Chapter 2, Self-Defense. But before we do, let's take a look at what the world looked like around the time that the movie came out, and a segment that I like to call It Came in '69.
That gun had gone off and it blown right up in the face.
Now, it wouldn't have done my finger a hell of a lot of good either, would it?
1969, the world's largest airplane, the Boeing 747, makes its first ever commercial flight. The Afro-American Society of Duke University leads a student takeover of the Allen Building over the concerns of a lack of opportunities for African-American students and increasing black faculty. And the official ruling stating students have the right to express opinions at odds with the government is decried by the U.S. Supreme Court in the Tinker versus Des Moines School District case. That's 1969, but let's take a look back even further. Let's take a look at the setting of our movie in 1869. So, flashing back, prospectors in Malleogo, Victoria, Australia discovered the largest alluvial gold nugget ever found, known as the Welcome Stranger. The Iron and Steel Institute is formed in London, England. It's a birthday for Nadezhda Krupskaya, who is a Russian Marxist revolutionary and Vladimir Lenin's wife. Birth date of Alice Hamilton, an American physician, and William V. Pratt, an American admiral. So as we said in a previous chapter, this movie in 1969 was created as a way for United Artists to basically find work for their workers, brought to light when James Garner's company, Cherokee Productions, was struggling to find a concept for a movie, and James Garner leaves the office and sees outside a sticker saying, "Support your local police," a movement that was popular at the time. And he comes back and says, "I have a good idea." They make the movie with a budget of $750,000. It was a bad opening weekend, and the fear was that the movie was going to be quickly shelved, but they posted a $10,000 bond to have just one more week in theaters, and fortunately, word of mouth did catch on. Ultimately, the movie makes around $5 million, so it was a success, but we may not have been standing here talking about it today if it wasn't for that additional $10,000 bond that was posted to have another week in the theaters. And this has been It Came in '69. Let's take a quick break. When we get back, we'll see how the town of Callender does their expressing of its opinions against their government.
Hello, I'm Robert T. Smith, host of Support Your Local Podcast. I want to take a moment to remind you to hit that fast forward button. That is, unless you want to hear about something good being done. Anyone who knows me knows that I love bowling. In 2016, I founded the Smith Family Bowling Scholarship Foundation, intended to honor my father's hard work and dedication to community service and award scholarships to youth bowlers throughout the nation. To date, we've awarded well over $15,000 in scholarships. If you are a bowler, know a bowler, have ever seen a bowler, or heard about anyone who has ever seen a video of a bowler, I'd love for you to help promote the SFBSF and its mission. Please go to sfbsf.com and see what we're all about. While you're there, please consider hitting that donate button and helping us make a brighter future for our youth. Again, that's sfbsf.com. Thank you for your time.
When we left off last episode, there was gold in them thar hills, and the loss of Millard Frymore, if that really is his name, became the gain of the town of Callender, Colorado. The boom causes the town to practically grow overnight to a rowdy, lawless location, much to the dismay of the mayor and town council. Some well-placed exposition, both with visual aids and not, I love a good map, let us know that the miners are having issues with the Danby family. The Danby family. I'm not going to leave that. You know what? I'm leaving that in. The Danby family forcing a portion of their findings with nothing in return. Speaking of Danbys, we meet who we assume is going to be our main antagonist, or at least one of them, Joe Danby, riding into town. But we begin our scene today with a much slower paced song, and the camera pans up from a horse coming into town, and we see our star, Mr. James Garner. With the music, the town too is quieter and less rowdy as it was in our previous scene. And I think this is great effect to be used because this is our hero reveal. There's no chaos going around. There's no frantic energy and movement. There's not people just randomly lifting their arms up and down. There's not a person doing jumping jacks in the middle of the street. It's not doing anything to draw your eye away from James Garner, which is a great, great little trick. One of the first things I noticed in this is that he is wearing almost all black. And whoop, 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 trope alert. As we did in our previous episode, I'm going to be pointing out several Western tropes that either do or do not happen in this one. When this movie was made, it was with the intention of kind of being a counter to the classic traditional Western that we saw in the 40s and 50s and even into the early 60s, where everything was so formulaic that it was cool, basically, to go against that and go against what the expectations of your classic Western is. And this is one of them. So James Garner's writing in, he's wearing a black coat, black pants, black hat, even wearing black gloves. And this is interesting because the trope in Westerns that you always hear is that the good guys wore the white hat and the bad guy would wear the black hat. That is until Will Smith came in with Men in Black and Wild Wild West, and he proclaimed proudly that the good guys dress in black, and you should remember that, in case you ever face to face and make contact. But in doing some research, I found that it's a stereotype that's not actually necessarily true. If you go and look at a lot of Westerns, there's not necessarily a lot of them where the bad guy is just wearing a black hat and the good guy is wearing a white hat. And especially ones that are actually accurately period pieces. People wore different varieties of colors. A lot of people were wearing brown hats in the movies. So if you go back and actually watch Westerns, keep an eye out to see that there's actually quite a few people wearing black hats. Almost all of the participants in Tombstone are wearing black hats, good guys and bad guys. A lot of your John Wayne movies, black hats. So I'm not sure where the stereotype came from, but in doing my research, I find that it just doesn't really exist a whole lot. But regardless, as the camera changes shots and the orchestra kicks back in, we're seeing a street that's filled with people who apparently they only exist to raise their hats in the air and wave them around like they just don't care. As many others in the Movies by Minute podcast family have pointed out, looking at a movie really closely and for such a small amount of time, granted we're doing chapters, but some of them are doing it by a minute, you're really forced to take a close look at the background action and the extras, and this movie is no different. I'll point out some noticeable ones, like my friend on Madame Orr's balcony, who's just continually shooing somebody away to the right. This scene in particular is where I really started to notice that the extras must have been told to make movements, but not anything that will draw attention. They remind me of the background characters in the video game Street Fighter II. Great game, for all of you old enough to remember playing that in the arcade. But specifically on the Guile or the Balrog stage, there's just people in the background that are repeating the same motions over and over again. And for this scene, it seems that the extras are just raising their hats above their head and side to side or up to down for no apparent reason. And if it was one or two people, they might be trying to get somebody's attention. I get that. But this is like most of the 100 or so extras that you can see in the background. As James Garner puts his horse on the rail, we see someone whose direction must have been, whatever you do not look in the camera. And he does two things. He looks just off of the camera, and he appears to save the guy next to him from stumbling into James Garner because he pulls him up by his shoulder. So keep an eye on that as he's getting off his horse. We cut to a close-up of James Garner. His hat is drawing a shadow over his eyes, the stoic look on his face, and the black hat. And you wonder if in 1969, were theater goers ever led to believe that Garner would be playing a bad guy or a man of mystery? And we'll touch a little bit later. But judging by the trailer, you wouldn't think so, because that's a pretty crazy comedic cornball comedy type trailer. Unless the goal was to portray him more of the anti-hero, which was coming a little bit more prominent in movies. But it's interesting, there's a couple points in this movie where there seems to have been a thread that maybe our hero has a past or is a little bit more sinister than we're led to believe. So keep an eye on that. But with this hero shot, now's a great time to get to know who I assume is going to be our lead. So, spoilers for an over 50-year-old movie. Let's take a look at Mr. Garner and a segment called Remember the Name.
That's about all I'm going to do the rest of my life is go around remembering your name.
So, James Garner, born April 7th, 1928. He left us July 19th, 2014. Very long life, a very long career in movies and television. So starting out his life at age 16, he tried to do a couple odd jobs here and there. And when he didn't really care for any of them, he joined the Merchant Marines of the United States. And that was near the end of World War II. He liked the work, he liked his shipmates, but he did suffer from chronic seasickness, which I found interesting in research because, maybe if you are known to have seasickness, maybe the Merchant Marines is not necessarily the place that you want to join. Perhaps the Army, perhaps somewhere else. Granted, this is during World War II. Maybe he was just trying to not see battle. But that really couldn't be the case because soon after he enlisted in the Army National Guard and he served his first 7 months in California. But then the Korean War happened and he went to Korea for 14 months as a rifleman. He was part of the 24th Infantry Division. He was wounded twice, first in the face and hand by shrapnel from a mortar round. And second, he got friendly fire from one of the U.S. fighter jets when he dived into a foxhole. He was hit in his buttocks. So I wonder, yes, when I read that, if perhaps James Garner is the basis for Forrest Gump. And all I could hear in my head when I was reading that was, I was shot in the buttocks. So, fun fact, James Garner, he received the Purple Heart in Korea for the first wound. He qualified for the second one. The eligibility requirement is as the result of friendly fire while actively engaging the enemy, but he actually did not receive the second Purple Heart until 1983, 32 years after the event. So, fun fact, and something that we'll see in this Remember the Name kind of throughout, is a lot of the actors and people in this time frame obviously were forced or voluntarily joined the service because that's just kind of what you did back then. But yes, so James Garner is a Korean War veteran and a double Purple Heart recipient, which I thought was super cool. But after coming back, he did start his acting career. He had several feature film roles, including Sayonara with Marlon Brando. That was in 1957. But he really got his big break when he started playing the role of professional gambler Brett Maverick in this Western series Maverick. That ran from 1957 to 1960. Only Garner and the series creator Roy Huggins thought that Maverick could compete with the Ed Sullivan Show and the Steve Allen Show. But for 2 years, it actually beat both of them in the time slot. And for those of you that are too young, like obviously Ed Sullivan Show predates me. That's before my time, but I know its cultural significance. I know how huge the Ed Sullivan Show was, especially in a time where there were only so many channels, and that meant there was only so many shows being played. For the show Maverick to beat a cultural icon like the Ed Sullivan Show speaks to the popularity of it. And the show definitely made James Garner almost immediately a household name. So that's where a lot of people going into this movie know James Garner from, is he was Maverick from 1957 to 60. So he has that Western feel to him. He's had that experience. In 1963, he was in The Great Escape with Steve McQueen. He's working with Richard Attenborough, Donald Pleasance, David McCallum, James Coburn, Charles Bronson. And those who are not familiar with The Great Escape, it is a movie about people escaping a German prisoner of war camp during the World War II. Great movie. Go out of your way to see it if you have not already. In 64, Garner creates Cherokee Productions, which is where we get this movie. It's the production company for Support Your Local Sheriff. He produced a few movies, notably The Art of Love, Duel Diablo, Hour of the Gun, A Man Could Get Killed, Grand Prix, a few others that did not necessarily score well. They were not big hits at the box office. So Garner started to get a little bit written off as a movie star, despite his fame and fortune coming from his TV series Maverick. In 1969, fun fact, along with this movie, he was also in Marlowe, which was a detective drama featuring a kung fu scene with Bruce Lee, which I found very interesting. You just don't think Bruce Lee when you think James Garner, I guess. But obviously, that same year, he comes out with 1969. He comes out with Support Your Local Sheriff, which, as we mentioned earlier, ended up being a big box office success and kind of put Garner back on the map. Those that may not know him from Maverick or may not know him from these movies may know him from the 70s, where he had a long run as the lead actor in The Rockford Files. So Garner is one of those special actors that doesn't just have one thing that he's known for. He was able to transcend decades and actually have two big television hits, something that's a little bit rarefied. But he's very, very well known as an actor. I knew him from this movie. I actually know him predominantly from 1994's Maverick, the movie with Mel Gibson, Jodie Foster, and then James Garner playing a character in that as well. So I, at that age, obviously I was around 12, did not equate the two. So I've seen Support Your Local Sheriff, Support Your Local Gunfighter with my dad at a younger age for numerous times on TBS. And then Maverick kind of hit right around the time that we got the free month of HBO. Those that again are too young, every once in a while, if you didn't have HBO or Cinemax or Showtime, they would run an offer where you got a free month of it. And HBO at that time was predominantly just like three movies over and over and over and over and over again every day. One of those movies was Maverick with Mel Gibson. So I had to watch that, or I didn't have to. I chose to watch that very often. End up taping it and watching it when we ran out of our time on it. So I knew him as that character in there as well. 2000, it was in Space Cowboys with other people like Tommy Lee Jones, Clint Eastwood. So his career has spanned almost 50 years and is known for a lot of iconic roles. He's been he's been awarded quite a bit. 1958, he has a Golden Globe Award for Sayonara. In 1959, he's nominated for Maverick. 63, Golden Globe nominee for The Wheeler Dealers. In 76, 78, and 80, or 76, 78, 79, and 80, he gets nominated for a Primetime Emmy for The Rockford Files. In 77, he won. In 78, 79, and 80, he's nominated for a Golden Globe for The Rockford Files. In 81, he's nominated for the Golden Globe for Brett Maverick. He was nominated also for a Primetime Emmy for that role. He's nominated for Murphy's Romance. He's nominated for Promise. He won a Primetime Emmy for Promise. He was nominated for My Name is Bill W. He won in 1991. He won a Golden Globe, was nominated for a Primetime Emmy for Decoration Day. In 93, he won a Golden Globe and nominated for a Primetime Emmy for Barbarians at the Gate. 94, he is nominated for both Primetime Emmy and Golden Globe for Breathing Lessons. 95, he's given a Screen Actors Guild Award nomination for the Rockford Files miniseries or TV movie. 2004, he is nominated for a Screen Actors Guild Award for The Notebook. In 2004, he also wins a Screen Actors Guild Award for the Lifetime Achievement Award. And then in 2010, the TCA Career Achievement Award. So very well decorated, both as a soldier, but as an actor as well, spanning, again, 5 different decades. This man is a cultural icon. So regardless of where you remember him from, you know who James Garner is. A long and successful career of a instantly recognizable actor, one Mr. James Garner. And this has been Remember the Name.
You tell him I remember his name.
And we're back. We see that the stern look is aimed at the crowd being raucous outside of Madame Orr's house, and that our favorite extra is on the balcony, still frantically telling someone to shoo over to his right. As Garner shakes his head at the sight, he enters the Mint Saloon, and we see from a flyer just outside the door that there is going to be a horse auction soon. We then see the rowdy crowd filling the saloon. It's smoke filled, and there are at least 5 full tables of patrons. There's a crowd lining the actual bar, and most of the patrons appear to just be stumbling through the crowd, but a few of our hat wavers have made their way inside, so keep an eye on the extras. Mr. Garner orders a whiskey, and as he's beginning to drink, the noise of the bar is pierced by the shriek of a lady, or at least what we think is a lady. Maybe it was the man about to be shot. I don't know. We never heard him talk before Joe Danby gets to his feet, and Joe beats him to the draw. Joe likes to tempt fate on more than one level. Not only is he in rowdy saloons playing cards and getting in gunfights, but his seat is literally right next to a clearly marked exit door where his back would be. And of course, famously, Wild Bill Hickok, for his safety and to ease his paranoia, he famously never sat with his back to the door because this would allow him to see anyone who came in looking for him. And legend has it, there's some discrepancies on how accurate this is, but the legend is that the one time that he wasn't able to sit with his back to the wall, that he had to have his back to the door, was when he was in Deadwood and he was playing cards and was shot in the back. Bill was holding in his hand aces and eights, 2 pair, and that is what has famously become now known as the dead man's hand. Fun fact for the day. As Joe shoots the unnamed man, I did notice something that happens throughout the movie. Granted, this is a crowded bar and things seem to have escalated quickly, but people are standing right beside and right behind 2 people that are about to have a gunfight. If one of the people involved are even slightly part stormtrooper, you're catching a bullet. But alas, we'll see that quite a few times throughout the movie. Joe quickly states to the crowd that the man drew first and that it was a fair fight. And I'm curious, in a town that doesn't have a lawman, what difference that little distinction makes. But at least Joe is smart enough to cover his butt and letting people know that it was self-defense. James Garner calls out Joe over the fact that Joe had used an old trick to make it appear that the other person drew first. And as you rewatch it, you notice that he's accurate in it, where Joe does drop his left shoulder slightly before drawing his gun with his right. But I'm not entirely sure what good that does, because to me that little extra action is just more movement and more delay in you drawing the gun. So you have to be pretty confident in your drawing ability, guns, not pencils, to purposely delay yourself in getting your gun out of your holster. But that's just me. When Joe wants to know what he means by it, Garner brings up something that I wondered about, the legality of what Joe did. Joe shot the man before he could be shot. He's alive and the man is dead. That's the idea of the game, right? Is what Garner says. And I guess that's what I've always wondered. If Joe pulled his gun out from under the table and shot the guy without him seeing it coming, that's flat out murder. I get that. But if 2 people are standing up in an argument and reaching for their guns, at some point one of them is going to have to draw first. So regardless of who gets shot and who lives, wouldn't it be understood that a gunfight just happened? So either it's illegal to gunfight and Joe is guilty, or gunfights are okay and Joe is not guilty. We get to see Bruce Dern, Joe Danby, playing the blowhard bully to a T here. First with his expression of sheer confusion that someone would dare question what he had said about the fight, and then when giving his name to who we now know as Jason McCullough, the attempt at bullying Jason into remembering his name. Jason, unflinching, has his first assertive stance against the bully with his comment about having nothing better to do in life than remembering his name. And a disapproval of the taste of the whiskey follows, and Jason exits the bar, and interesting enough, turning his back to Joe. And at first I thought this was a careless choice, but in seeing it over and over, I've come to the conclusion that Jason has seen that Joe is trying to just skirt the law rather than break it. So his attempt at persuading everyone that it was a fair gunfight is the only reason that Jason would do this. Because to just haul off and shoot Jason in the back would be downright murder, and not enough people could see it otherwise. So, really interesting kind of psychological choice. I don't know if that was thought of that deeply in shooting it, but I just found it interesting that Jason would turn his back on somebody that just committed murder in his eyes. We cut to a sign of Emma's Tasty Home Cooked Meals, costing $3 for breakfast, $3 for lunch, and $3 for dinner. As this is set in the 1850s, the cost of the meal in today's money would be roughly around $104. And that's the problem with a lot of movies that try to equate money from the past. It just doesn't have the same impact with an audience if someone passes someone else a quarter and we're left to rely on the audience to go, oh, that's like $20. So the amounts are inflated to numbers that are relatively high, even for the time frame that movie was shot. That's another trope. I won't do the trope alert, but I think of a lot of westerns, specifically like the westerns like the Man with No Name trilogy, the Clint Eastwood movies, where they're getting bounties for thousands and thousands of dollars, which would be like millions in today's economy. So it was nice to see that something that is supposed to cost a lot in this scenario, as we'll see, we in our 2022 eyes only see it as $3. I'm like, wow, that's not a lot. I wish I could get a meal for $3. But in the 1800s, that's like $100 just to have a meal. So kudos to them for keeping the amounts relatively similar to what they would be for the time frame. We see a disheveled lady carrying a pot of food around the tables. And are we to believe that this is Emma herself? I believe so, personally, but perhaps it's her daughter, perhaps it's just somebody trying to find work. As she comes around and serves a few patrons, we easily see like 20 people amongst the two tables that are in a T. Emma, supposedly, slops a ladle at what appears to be beans onto Jason's plate before a rowdy patron does something frisky to turn her attention away. Jason is less than pleased with the food, but even more so at the change in the price on the sign from $3 to $8. That takes the current price to around $320 in today's money. The gentleman to Jason's left makes a comment about inflation getting right between mouthfuls, and I wonder, is the price what you pay after you've had your meal, or what it was when you got the food? Did Jason just lose another $5 without actually taking a bite of this meal? Jason strikes up a conversation with the gentleman to his right, a, uh, a bean-bearded man, as I have in my notes. If you look, he has unfortunately just a bean chilling underneath his lip, and it makes me wonder, is he saving it for later? Because, hey, if I got a bean at $3 a meal and I can hold on to it and eat it later when it was worth, $20 a meal, it's a good deal. Maybe it was an original, stockpiler. But anyways, Jason asks him about whether there is actually indeed gold in them thar hills, and the guy is anxious to show him a small, about 4-inch bag that supposedly contains nuggets and gold dust that he got it for just that afternoon. So there is, in fact, more gold than just what was sitting in Millard Frymore's grave. As the sign of Ollie Perkins' store looms over his shoulder, Jason hears news that if he wanted somewhere to sleep, there are cots available for $20 for an 8-hour shift. And in today's money, since I'm sure you were asking, which, let's face it, probably should be the title of the episode if it wasn't the name of the chapter on the DVD, that would be right around $750 for a cot. Yeah, that's a bit stiff. Jason finds out that there are job postings down at the SA office when there is a ruckus at the end of the table. Two patrons are getting ready to start yet another Western trope, the Brawl food fight. And Jason, not wanting to miss out on a morsel of this $8 meal, yells his protest. He stops the action until he can grab his food and get clear. The persuasion must be a superpower of Jason's, because not only does he do it here, but we'll see something similar, spoilers, later on in the movie, where he can just stop a crowd with the power of his voice. The two resume their fight, and they upend easily over $100 of Emma's tasty food. This not saloon brawl quickly involves most of the patrons of the two tables, resulting in chairs and boards being broken over strangers, bringing more participants into the chaos. Jason enjoys his meal as he watches the fight unfold before him, and even offers a board to help to another one. we close our chapter with someone getting a pie face, only with a plate of beans. And Jason cringes at the sight, probably not because of the mess, but because of the waste of $8. And that closes out our chapter for today. We will return shortly with chapter 3. But until then, please take the time to like and follow us on all of our social media platforms. Facebook, Instagram, we are Support Your Local Podcast. We have a YouTube channel, Support Your Local Podcast. Please subscribe. Check out our video versions of this podcast. As always, if you haven't already, subscribe to us on your local podcatcher. We are available on most of them. Look for us, Support Your Local Podcast. Please rate and review our podcast. That helps us greatly in getting moved up in the rankings, getting us noticed, making us bigger and better, and allow us to do more things for you. If you have the time, please hit us up. Leave us a comment, questions, comments, concerns, whatever it may be. I love conversing with the audience. Let's go there. Let's get some feedback going. But until then, as always, I appreciate you. Thank you for your time, and as always, support your local podcast.
He stuck his finger in the end of your what?